the journalists will obviously go to when are we going to get rid of pilots? Whereas actually reflecting on it, that's the really end game here. It's the end stop on a long game. The bit in the middle is like, there's so much AI involved in everything that's going on in aviation.
From Earhart Innovation Series, this is What Follows with Nate Tooley.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to What Follows, the podcast where we explore the people shaping aviation today and the ideas defining what comes next. I'm your host, Nate Tooley. I'm delighted to welcome to the show today Dave Edwards, Chief Executive of the Royal Aeronautical Society, one of the most historic and influential institutions in aviation. Founded in 1866, the Royal Aeronautical Society has stood at the center of aerospace innovation for more than 150 years. Today, it serves over 25,000 members worldwide and remains one of the leading forums for advancing aeronautical science, engineering, leadership, and professional development. Before joining the Royal Aeronautical Society, he served as chief executive of the Air Charter Association. Prior to that, he held leadership roles at Qatar Airways and spent 15 years with Gamma Aviation, serving on the group's board. Dave also earned a pilot's license at a young age of 17. What makes this conversation particularly fascinating is that David sits at the intersection of aviation's past and present and future. He has a front row seat to the technologies, the ideas, and the people shaping the next chapter of aviation. Let's get into it. David, welcome. Thanks for being on the show.
You're very welcome. It's good to see you.
So I definitely want to unpack the Royal Aeronautical Society a little bit and get to the future of aerospace and kind of the mission there. But before we do it, I want to start with your own story. So you earned your pilot's license at 17. You've worked across airlines and business aviation and charter operations, and then now you're leading one of the world's most respected aerospace institutions. I'm curious, what inspired you to get into aviation from the beginning, and how did you know that this was going to be really where you spend your life?
I quite often joke that, you read management books and it's all a game plan and you've got to do everything to get to where you want to be. I wouldn't say this was a plan at all. So it starts from, and there's loads of us like this. I loved airplanes, literally loved airplanes. That's what started it all off. When I was 14, I got a job at an airfield in Wales, where I'm from. So the left-hand side of the UK, for those of you who don't know. And kind of joke as well, if it hadn't been for that moment, I'd probably be in farming, because Wales is a big farming area. I got into aviation. I then went to university. I worked in a flying school when I was at university, probably focused more on the flying than I did on uni. And then when I left, I got into ground handling for business jets. So quite a weird segue, no idea, again, how it happened. It just seemed like a really cool thing to do. And that first, I just kept seeing all these celebrities and international business people and thinking, oh, this is quite a cool place to be. Carried on flying privately alongside that. But just when I reflect back on how it all happened, I used to say there's a lot of luck involved in all these lucky moments of my career. But when I sort of reflect back on what actually has driven me, I've always gone for roles which I didn't think I was sort of capable of. I just kept running for like more challenge and more challenge. And I guess, sink or swim moment, right? It kind of worked. And then ended up with a company where I spent 15 years, which was Gamma Aviation. I ended up quite a big operation in America as well, alongside Wheels Up. Ended up in the Middle East with them, based in Dubai, looking after the expansion of that business into the Middle East and Asia. Again, take me back to the little kid in Wales. None of this was a plan. And then I got the opportunity to go to Qatar Airways to run Qatar Executive, which was the business aviation division of that airline. Ended up running also some of the Royal flight work that went on there too. And again, none of this was a game plan. Quite surprised it all happened, but it did. And I came back to the UK after about 8 years overall in the Middle East and thought, so what next, really? It's, kind of achieved everything I never thought I would achieve within management roles in airlines. And then did a little bit of sort of consulting. COVID hit, which obviously was quite a strange time for everyone in aviation. And at the same time, this role popped up. And I'd been a member of the society for, by that point, about 20 years, I guess, something like 15, 20 years. And it just felt like the right fit for me to actually, it's a bit rubbish to say you want to give back at some point in your career. But I just thought, like, what the next stage of the impact bit? Sort of, I can carry on focusing entirely on my career in aviation, sort of the next biggest job. And I thought, actually, this is just a new one because I get to experience so much that I've never got near within aerospace, within the society. So yeah, 5 years in now, and it's been amazingly good fun so far. So more of that, I
Wow.
hope.
That's incredible. And it sounds like, I mean, through the theme I'm seeing kind of throughout your career too is not only, leaning forward into whatever was next, right? And kind of stretching into what was there, but also a little bit of kind of going with the patterns you were seeing. It seemed a little bit like you're kind of following that along. And so now jumping here to now present day. So Royal Aeronautical Society, not a new society, 160 years, give or take, right? For those that are not familiar, can you tell us about the society and mission and kind of what the society does today?
Yeah, and as the chief exec, it's quite an odd job because I know that it will outlast me by some stretch, and I'm very much a kind of custodian of the role. I'm not going to be here for. Well, I would love to think I'll be here for the next 160 years, but it's probably quite impossible. So
yeah, you gave one job 15 years, so why not 10x that 150 years of this role?
Medical science support for it. So 1866, a group of fairly wealthy people in the UK came together to discuss how birds flew. That's literally what the first meeting was about. We've got the National Aerospace Library, which is pretty much our historical collection amongst a lot of other stuff. So I am able to go and read our minutes from that first meeting. And it literally is a group of guys in those days, sadly, sitting around going, can anybody work out how a bird flies? Because it's, if we can work that out, just to sort of give you the context of that, that's about 34 years before the Wright brothers were born. So this isn't a case of sort of we'd heard someone in America was doing some great stuff. This was literally a group of people who just thought, okay, we've got balloons. So we'd been flying balloons quite a lot by that point. But how can we actually, the line that was there was, how do we commit aerial navigation? How do we move between places?
Aerial navigation. Okay.
Yeah. So that was the fundamental part of it. If you read some of the minutes, there's some amazing moments where lots of deniers of this being possible popped up. But gradually, we helped deliver it. The Wright brothers got our first gold medal at the turn of the century, just after they'd done their flight. Our president at the time, when you're in this role, we talk about people like them. Obviously, back at the 1900s, Brewer, who I refer to a lot, as if he's my best mate. Brewer was Wright brothers' agent in Europe, but he also was the conduit to sense checking their ideas. So when they came up with an idea, it would get fleshed out in the society. They were fellows of the society as well at the very beginning. We'd been going for about 30 or 40 years by this point when they joined. And then rolling forward, we've been part of every big moment throughout aerospace ever since. So whether it's, cutting edge stuff today, so eVTOL, advanced mobility, whether it was the space race back in the sort of late 50s, early 60s, where it was the generation of the first ever jet engine in the 40s. We had a role checking the design of every aircraft that the British flew in the Second World War. We've been there in every moment of aerospace ever since. Depending on how you know us, you'll either know us as like a big engineering institution, so equivalent to AIAA, you'll know, or you might know us as a membership body. Basically, it's it's an honor to become a member of the society in one way or another, or you will know it as a sort of charity that does outreach in schools, or you will know us as somebody who validated your engineering degree. So we're many things to many people, but overall, if we shut down tomorrow, the world would be a polar place without a shadow, and the aerospace world would suffer.
Yeah. Wow. No kidding. And so the ability to look back through the organization's DNA and 160 years and these major themes you're talking about, one thing that's on my mind today is, you look at AI and autonomy and electrification, eVTOL, but even just, electrification at larger scale, urban air mobility, advanced air mobility, and new forms of propulsion. From your perspective, does it seem like we're at another one of those major inflection points? Like we had the jet age, we had the dawn of commercial aviation, the space race, as you were talking about. Does it seem like we're at another one of those points of inflection today?
Yeah, I think across many different spheres, right? The pace of change of the world obviously I've definitely got to that age where I'm like my dad, trying to get the video recorder to work. Yeah, I look around what's happening. And if you think about my career, the aircraft that are flying today were flying when I was born. I mean, there hasn't been that much change. There's been kind of, tweaks and changes and advances, but they haven't been really significant. If you look at engine technology today, if you look at engine technology sort of rolling forward 15 years from now, if you look at where eVTOL is today as an interesting idea. It's not tried and tested. There's loads of barriers in the way, but give it 20 years, I think we'll see an entirely different landscape there. If you then look at where we are with space, because in our lifetimes, whilst we saw the shuttle program, we didn't see anyone land on the surface of the moon. I mean, I don't think either of us were still, I'm pretty sure I wasn't even born when the man went to the moon. But the next iteration of all that and what SpaceX and it's like might end up doing within a tangible distance from today is just fascinating. And I think, again, if we go back through time, the moments that have really inspired people have been those big shifts and changes. So when as a sector we've got slightly repetitive, slightly not boring, but slightly just routine and nothing's really changed, I think these are the exciting moments because some of the stuff that was going on, particularly with the space domain during COVID. I mean, there were some launches during the COVID period, and I'd be watching it live streaming on YouTube like a kid, just genuinely like a kid, because it's the stuff that I guess our parents saw in the past happening. And so, yeah, I think whatever your view, and as a sector, we're quite good at sort of pulling ideas apart and finding all the reasons why they won't happen. But just to the outside world and the wider general public, there's really exciting stuff going on at the moment, which I hope will inspire, that next generation coming through as well.
Well, in that next generation, I love that you brought that up because, a lot of what makes aviation accessible or makes it a challenge to it being successful or accessible is for awareness and inspiration for the future aviators, right? And whoever is going to be the next people moving into it. And, if we're not careful, aviation can be a bit daunting to get into. It can be a bit of an unknown. But when you look at today, I mean, I have two daughters. My older daughter is old enough that she is paying attention to what's going on in the world and kind of thinking about her place in that world. And you mentioned looking at this stuff like a kid. I mean, I see her eyes light up of, oh my gosh, the world of aviation and aerospace. It's full of opportunity, and hopefully we'll see that really spark a lot of the next generation of aviators coming in. And if you had to pick. Not to put you on the spot, but to put you on the spot, if you had to pick something that's underway right now that's really sparking an interest for you, what's top of mind for you? What's something that you're particularly excited to see play out?
So I think from my perspective, definitely everything to do with space, because it's not something my career has really touched until this role. So there's that element of kind of childish excitement about it anyway. Plus, whatever we can do within aviation more broadly, it won't be as exciting. It will be better. We'll be doing better things. So whether it's lower fuel burns, whether it's more efficient aircraft, whether it's the ability to make and recycle and repurpose aircraft in a better way, whether it's to involve more different materials in the construction of aircraft. For a long, long time, they're still going to look pretty much like aircraft. But the minute I see people landing on the moon's surface again and maybe getting to Mars, I mean, that blows my mind kind of territory. And, I, as rational and as grown up and as sort of mechanical I can be about my thoughts, it's just, I cannot get my brain around that. So yeah, when that starts happening, I think that will be such an exciting moment for all of us, regardless of, wherever you are on the age spectrum. It will still be such a cool moment.
It is.
Coming back a little bit to inspiring the next generation, I get involved in a lot of this, a lot of big policy debates, a lot of initiatives, worldwide initiatives. I still don't think kids are not excited by aerospace, aviation, and space at all. I still think they are just as excited and, stupid as we were about it. The challenge is we're now in such a busy world for everything, and grabbing attention and making us actually talked about is probably our biggest challenge. So I don't think the interest has gone at all. I think it's just as exciting. Still look at helicopters and aircraft flying over them without a doubt, but our ability as a sector to get into their brains about it with more advice and more capture, that's where we're having a challenge at the moment. But I don't think underneath it, they're not as excited about the things that excited you and me.
Interesting. Yeah. And so it's the connection there. So the part of getting excited about an industry or aviation or aerospace, especially for someone kind of on the outside then trying to look in, is being able to imagine, their role in that or their participation in that and kind of picture themselves in that. And, I can't think about that without thinking about automation and AI and how that is reshaping the interaction between the human involved in this and the machines we're interacting with or the technology we're interacting with. But just a mere 20 years into the future, what are your thoughts on what the role of a pilot or an operator will be with these machines? And are there any things that you think will remain, I guess, fundamentally human?
Again, we're in such a weird time at the moment, but a positively weird time at the moment. Positively as in it's a good thing. If I go back as a sort of society at heart, we're still a business, right? However we function, I still have people who work with me. We have systems we have to use to Microsoft Word, etc., stuff like that we have to make work. If I go back to where we were with AI 2 years ago compared to where we are today, they are different scenarios. I mean, literally, the stuff that we're now using AI for across all of our different processes is just eye-opening. I mean, bewildering at times. And the ability for that to free up more time for us to do more good stuff without having to worry so much about the routine is, fascinating. So put myself forward 20 years. I genuinely don't know what the world will look like in 20 years. The one thing that I'm fairly comfortable about, though, is that, and it's kind of why societies like ours exist for 160 years. Technology has, so someone who joined in 1866 to somebody who joined in 1916, they wouldn't recognize that period. They wouldn't recognize the technology change either. So it's been done before. We shouldn't be that scared about it. The kind of continuing theme through all of that is people. And that's a good thing because aviation does rely a lot on people within it, the visions for the future. So I suppose really in terms of, how do I see a day when we won't have human pilots on an aircraft? I mean, at some point, probably. But will that be in 50 years? Will that be 100 years? Then you're coming down to the public perception and the public belief in trust in technology and people. And I think, the best philosophers in the world could spend weeks and weeks and weeks discussing this of, would I get in an aircraft tomorrow without a pilot that was entirely AI driven and no human involvement? I mean, the technology's there today, right? So we could technically probably just about do it today, routinely do it today, but we choose not to. And why do we choose not to? And that's where the philosopher comes in, because I guess we choose because at the moment we still have more trust in humans. With all their flaws, we still have more trust in humans and their part in the safety of aviation. Because if we lose safety in aviation, we're done. That's the whole reason why we all get up in the morning. Airlines spend much more money on safety than most other regulated industries do for all the right reasons. And that pilot interface in there is still so integral to what we're trying to do. But yeah, I say in physical terms, it can be done, but I think there's a public perception and public discussion that needs to happen before we get anywhere close to that happening.
Yeah. It's interesting because, the cases where automation and AI based automation are in practice in the transportation space, whether in the air or on the ground, what we're seeing overwhelmingly is that the safety of that technology is there, like to your point, in a lot of ways, and companies like Waymo have been proving that, their accident ratings on the ground are considerably lower or improved, and what I find fascinating about technology is, especially when it's when use in a dynamic environment, is we're prone with this maybe it's instinctual sort of the survivor mentality of we'd lack trust in it until it proves itself worthy of that trust, and it takes a long time to build that trust, and then one misstep of the technology and we jump back several layers, and And I think of it, like whenever I would work on, one of the old cars that I would have, and I get back on the road after doing a repair on it, and I'm leaned forward, I'm sitting on the edge of my seat of like, you lost my trust, car, and it's gonna take a while until it comes back, and I listen to the radio a little bit quieter. I kind of have my ear paying attention to, like, are we there yet? And it seems like that's what we're going to see with the use of this technology of we'll trust it, and in time. The bar is very high, and unfortunately, the first time there's a misstep on behalf of the technology, we go, yeah, I knew I couldn't have trusted it. We go back a few layers, right? And but any advice you would have for, I guess my thought is for those that are in the space and they're going to be interacting with this technology and interacting with more automation and developing not only a comfort level with it, but even a fluency with it, right?
Yeah, sure. I was just reflecting, actually. It's interesting how, you've gone straight to the nth degree on your thoughts on AI. It's kind of what a lot of the more journalistic people, and I'm not saying you're a journalist, the journalists will obviously go to when are we going to get rid of pilots? Whereas actually reflecting on it, that's the really end game here. It's the end stop on a long game. The bit in the middle is, like, there's so much AI involved in everything that's going on in aviation at the moment and aerospace more broadly. I think that incremental increases in technological outputs in terms of faster development work, faster research into things. Just to give you a sort of snapshot, like if I'm delivering a speech tomorrow morning on something niche within our sector, I'll research it and get it written probably before breakfast now, right? In 1954, the Duke of Edinburgh, the former Queen Elizabeth's husband, passed away now, obviously. He was a huge aviation person, and he delivered a speech to the society in 1954. And the speech was about aviation's role in developing the world. Speech took over a year to research and put together. For a 20-minute speech, over a year. And I'm using that as a sort of analogy to the stuff we can do in aviation today because of AI will free us up time-wise to do even more cool stuff. So development projects, and it's not like aviation has only recently discovered AI, right? I mean, it's been going for decades and decades. It wasn't right in front of me on ChatGPT. But I think there's really exciting stuff that we're going to use AI for way before we start having debates about where pilots fit into this. And that, as someone young coming through now, to be part of like this revolution we are heading towards, without a doubt, on everything within aerospace, revolution-wise, to come into it with all of the skills, all of the AI skills to be part of that. What a cool place to be, because you are basically reinventing yourself as the Wright brothers sort of 150 years, just over 50 years later, because you're now part of the next iteration of what aerospace is going to look like. And I'm sure you can use AI and go and develop the next, seat in a classroom, and that'll be a really important thing for somebody to do. Or you can be part of using AI to help us push forward the barriers on fuel burns, on incremental increases to aerodynamics, retrofitting aircraft to make them even more efficient and things like that, but with a kind of processing power that we've just not had before. And so, yeah, from that perspective, I just think, you would be remiss not to look at aviation with those kind of background skills as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of very human characteristics happening. Pilots are making decisions. They're interacting with other people. They're doing inherently human things. But there's also a lot of high cognitive load things that are happening that, having to process raw data coming forward, having to correlate different pieces of information and kind of synthesize that together, having to digest both visual and audible information and sensory information and synthesize all of that together. And what I find fascinating about, this concept of more of this technology coming into the cockpit too, is there are things humans can do very well, and there are things a computer system or an AI system can do extraordinarily well. And when we integrate those very well, not only can the end outcome of that flight or that mission be safer and more, calm and logically predictable, But in a very real way, it also presents the opportunity for the human to do more of the human things, right? More of where humans excel, and offload what has become a burden on a human, but not necessarily a human quality, and put that onto the system that can do that very well. We actually just had, here at Earhart, we had a team come by the other week that could monitor brain activity, so cognitive load and focus and attention, and even able to monitor things like if your ears detected something, they would know if that actually imprinted mentally, if you actually heard what was heard, or if it kind of went in ear, one went out the other. And we were particularly interested in cognitive load and the burden upon a human to do highly complex things in our simulator. And so, put on the system and put our pilots in what were fairly stressful situations and kind of complex aviation situations. And then at the click of a button, enabled a lot of this automation software or a lot of automation capability that at Earhart we've developed. And what I find fascinating about the use of this is we could watch in real time the cognitive load just plummet. You could see this, shoulders come up and this sigh of relief of like, oh my gosh, this is much less draining, right? And I think that's what it feels like to be more human. Is it feels like we're more in our strengths, I guess, right? And I don't know. Hopefully that's something we're going to see. Is the future of aviation in some ways becomes more computer based and computer augmented and AI augmented, but in some ways that also presents the opportunity for aspects of that to be more human, and I don't know. It'd be fascinating. Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, play to your strengths.
Well, as humans, we're great at taking decisions on information that's presented to us. We're not as good at providing all the information to ourselves to then make the decision. If I go back to the start of my career, and this makes me feel like really old, obviously iPads were a thing, right? When I started. And if you know the Airways manuals, the Jeppesen Airways manuals, they used to arrive in paper form. Every month there'd be an update of those paper manuals. You might remember this, but I'm saying this to your younger viewers. Most of my mornings once a month would be taken by replacing, go to page 85, replace page 85 with a new version of page 85, turn the page over, open the binder, put the next one in. And then I can remember the moment when the first electronic flight bag arrived, which was a huge computer, but it didn't have a keyboard. And so, the value of this was, I think, about sort of $15,000 for that first computer. And when the Jeppesen charts went onto that, I mean, it was an absolute revolution. It was a revolution with the regulators because it was a frightening moment that, you needed all these different power sources and what happens if the computer fries. But now, a private pilot's jumping into an aircraft with so much tech that makes their life simple, but they don't, obviously, you would like them to know how the tech's working and what it's shortcutting for them. But ultimately, the workload as a private pilot has gone so much back to actually just flying the airplane. That's kind of what I'm expecting you to do, which, to your point, isn't a bad thing because whilst I would still love you to know how to navigate if it failed, ultimately, you're just focusing on smaller bits. So your cognitive load is actually directed in the right place at the right times. Let's say going forward 20 years, and that's 20 years ago, and think where a $15,000 computer was 15 years ago to now. It's going to be such a different world, exciting world, but just a different world.
Absolutely. Yeah. One thing that I feel like you just completed a 160-year arc just now. It was blowing my mind just a little bit. But if you go back to the start of our conversation, what you had described as really the origin story for the society and this aerial navigation, right? It was in some ways one of the most simple things you can do of, hey, we would like to go from point A to point B, but do so in the air, right? And how do we do that? Birds do that. How do we do that? And aerial navigation then turned into, we need some sort of propulsion. We need some way to generate lift. We need some way to generate aerodynamic forces to have control. And then there should be ground and then eventually space-based navigation and then automation layers and complexity and complexity and complexity. And with that, the human role became in some ways less about aerial navigation and more about systems management, more about operating a machine, operating a system. And that system is then the conveyance for this aerial navigation. And it almost seems like if you then fast forward, yet another 20 or 30 or 40 years into the future, or maybe even 5 or 10 at the rate we're going. The systems management has the opportunity to then be managed by systems, be managed by this automation, and the role of the human. In some ways, we're now back 160 years ago going, we're just responsible for aerial navigation. We're responsible from going from one point to another point. And this complexity that we have created by performance and capability can be managed away, and humans can go, it's almost like, we're back to birds go from one point to another, and it can be simple, it can be natural, it can be in some ways very human. It's an interesting full circle experience.
It is. And just over the years, these full circles are always starting again. So whilst we were worrying about aerial navigation 160 years ago, the stuff that we've worried about since has been those moments right through. There will be a load more to come. I got to Kitty Hawk last year, which, as you can imagine, it's the place you need to go to as a pilot. You've got to go to Kitty Hawk.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
It's actually during the government shutdown, so it was so quiet. There was no one around at all. And what a weird seminal moment of standing on the actual track that the Wright Flyer first flew, and thinking, like, this isn't even a takeoff run in some of the aircraft I fly. This is just crazy, but just those weird, wonderful moments of somebody with sometimes nothing better to do than try this. It just feels like that kind of, what you do at a weekend of see if I can break something. And that's the kind of excitement of hearing it. It's sort of, solve a problem that somebody didn't really knew how to fix. And all of a sudden you're flying aircraft, and then put yourself into, so yesterday I did a quick trip for work up to Glasgow in Scotland, and just didn't have a moment's thought about this. I just got on an aeroplane, like listening to podcasts and playing whatever rubbish game I've got on my iPhone at the moment. And I get up there and I just get off at the other end, and I go and have my meetings, and I come back. I just think when you actually take a step back from it, that's pretty crazy, because you have now got onto something that in all normal sort of dinner party settings doesn't work. How on earth can that thing get off the ground? But it is just so routine around us. And I suppose when you're looking at advanced air mobility, there's a few deniers of the need for this and a few deniers it will work and all that. But I'm pretty sure I know for a fact, if you go back to the abuse that the Wright brothers got at the beginning of all of this, it's the same. And there's, again, so many moments through aerospace's history where a lot of people have said, there's no need for this, it's silly, it won't work. And as I say, I just jumped on a flight yesterday and I did not give it one thought that I actually went flying yesterday. And so those moments will keep coming, and that's why, those reflective moments for me, like I say, I realize I'm not going to be the CEO here forever in comparison to 160 years. It is physically impossible, as much as we'd all love it. And that's what's kind of cool, is that there are generations of people who've gone through the society, famous names who've gone through the society, and they've all had their little parts in this bigger picture. There's a kid out there who hasn't been born yet, who's going to be part of this bigger picture for all of us at some point in the future. And that's I just incredible. It's just that kind of, it's just like handing it over to the next generation. I do as much as you can today, but knowing that the excitement that keeps us coming to work every day is going to be there for them, plus loads more as well, because it'll be a different world, a new horizons. That's a pretty cool thing to be part of.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. My next question was going to be to ask you for some parting thoughts, but that was so well spoken. So you read my mind. I mean, and hopefully that's a message where there is hope, there is inspiration, there is excitement, because to your point, what we do every day in aviation, my goodness, that is absolutely incredible. And we're just talking about aviation, not even talking about leaving the planet and aerospace, and it's just extraordinary. And I want to call out one thing you said too, of there have been so many incredible people that have come before us that have been moving the needle, that have done their part. And that's, honestly, that's one reason we created this podcast, is we like to explore what follows when that happens, and in a very real way, there are those that have not come here yet that are about to move the needle again as well. And the opportunity to be in that space, to participate in that space, and at least to be able to go from one point to another and be a user in that space is incredible. So I really appreciate your insight on that. and your time today. Before we part, any other, I guess, kind of final thoughts or insights you wanted to share?
I think it's quite interesting being a CEO because it was never really, I don't really remember a day in school where I wanted to be a CEO. It wasn't sort of the game plan. But I think it's really quite important to, particularly in the aerospace sector, to remember that there's still a kid in all of us, right? And that's probably what's made this the easiest job I've ever had, because every single day, in some way, shape or form, I get to sort of play with planes, which is kind of what as Jim one of my old bosses always used to say, 10% of your day as a CEO is really different. 90% is exactly the same as yesterday, but those 10% moments are where you keep going. And I get to do I'm so fortunate that I get to do some really exciting stuff in this role. To be honest, I'm doing a podcast with someone in the States. I mean, that doesn't happen in every job, don't love it. But the people I get to meet is amazing, very fortunate at it. I get to hear some of the brilliant minds of today talking in our building, telling the next generation, everyone about what's coming next, what they've learned. And I just think sometimes don't forget, there's that little kid in all of us that just sits there and goes, this is just awesome. This is such a cool place to be. So yeah, leave you with that, Ray.
I absolutely love that. And for those listening, I hope people take the opportunity to check in with that little kid, right? And find that excitement for it. And let's keep that alive. Dave, this has been an absolute pleasure. What you're doing is incredible, and what you've done with your career is incredible, and what you're doing with the society, it just continues to be a really an incredible movement in this industry. So thank you for that, and for your time, and for your insights. Thank you for being on.
You're really welcome. It's great to be here. Thanks so much.